as most of you know, we've got a very big issue with the logging of our watersheds. We've got a big issue with having access to clean drinking water. And that's just not an issue that we feel here in this area of the riding, but it's an issue that affects all Canadians. You know, luckily we've had some good local government here that stood up and said, well, you know what, we're going to grab the bull by the horns and figure out a way that we can sort of shoehorn ourselves into it to stop what's going on there. It's an important issue for myself. It's an important issue for the BC caucus, and I'm hoping that it'll be an important issue for the national agenda as well.
I don't know if you were aware of an article that was in the Vancouver Sun the other day, but it's about an exposition next year in Spain in 2008. So Spain is a country hosting the world on a water exposition. But the article goes on to say that Canada, buoyed up by the third largest amount of fresh water in the world, is not amongst the 95 nations officially signed up.
It's an international issue, and to not be at an international symposium, to at least listen. You know, they may not disagree, or you know, but at least send a representative there to hear what the other countries have to say is shameful. We have a responsibility to the world to safeguard their resources as much as safeguarding their own. And what we've been working on, and this water strategy is just sort of a part of it, is a national plan to meet our Kyoto commitment, and we've been calling it a carbon budget. And basically attacking greenhouse gas emissions the same way Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Martin attacked the deficit. And in the last year we've had two separate meetings, one where we had a representative from the David Suzuki Foundation come out and give a lecture and a talk to a broader range group of people, and we had somebody from the Sierra Club come out, give a talk about the broader range. And those are the type of people that are giving significant input into the carbon budget.
It's one of the huge things on this. When we're talking about carbon, we're losing old growth forest land, which I was just watching something actually the other night on, I believe, the Knowledge Network, or it may have been on CBC News World on the Earth, and how that these old growth forest areas and even newer, 60, 70-year-old forest areas are huge carbon sinks, which is great, so they absorb a lot of the carbon. But once you cut them down and the stumps rot, they wind up giving off huge, amazing amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, more than like a third of your cars in the whole country could give it a day. Yeah. I got shocked.
And that's why you think things like with the third largest water, Canada's one of the largest carbon sinks in the world that's capturing it, and as we log it, it's going in the opposite direction. Yes, thank you.
What mine and many others' concern is, it's August the 15th, and you saw yourself how little water there is already, and that was water-wise, an ideal year. We had record snowpacks up there this year. We had a very cold, wet May and June and early July this year. We may still go another 2 months without substantial rain. Next year we may not get much snow up there. Next year we may have an early hot summer. Next year we may not have much of a forest up there to retain our snow. We're in sort of, I believe, like a crisis now. We don't have years of studies. What can you as our local MP, as a federal government, do to sustain, again, it's our watershed. It's not the watershed. It's my watershed. It's each individual person that is sitting here now and everybody that is here. We need water to survive, to live. What can we do to retain that and preserve that so we don't run out of water, period? I mean, it's an issue of polluted water is one and a very important issue, but another is, will we just have water, period? Tofino ran out of water last year.
But you would be amazingly shocked at how fast word travels within the political community, provincial, federal, and municipal. The amount of influence and power that your letters and your emails and your telephone calls and your petitions have.
Okay. And these are 1,000-year-old, 6-foot diameter trees. The amount of water that these things suck up, they're monuments. Okay. Now there's 3 up there that haven't been chopped down, and they're probably going to fall over at some point on their own. But they're absolute 1,500-year monuments, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to put them down.
Is that the yellow cedars that are up there?
Sometimes they're
the
red.
biggest. Yellow cedars are slightly smaller, but they're just as old.
Those 3 trees, okay, if they're allowed to go back in there, will come out, not for the timber, because the timber they want to pull out is in the way. They're in the way of that timber. So they're going to take those trees out, not for commercial value. But can you imagine from an ecological point of view what we're doing here? 1,500-year trees putting on the ground just because we want to get a few more logs out? It's just criminal. Okay? There's something badly wrong here.
This is the way they're going to be operating across the country as they see the dwindling resources and in water and everything else. You cut the top of that off that's not in the watershed there, it is all a wet sponge. That is what holds the clouds. That's what's giving us our water right now. There's no snow cap up there, but we're getting runoff from this mountain. You cut that down, it blows dry. We don't have water. Right now, this year, we're dry in Chapman Creek.
That's why I hold forums like this at the community level to make those issues at the front of the agenda.
Take it there. I'm trying to tell you the urgency. This can't wait for Liberals to get into the power and Liberals to strike up committees and form a national water strategy. There needs to be moratoriums on the stuff now. There needs to be tax credits taken away from companies operating in watersheds now. It has to happen now. Tomorrow is too late. If we weren't in there putting our bodies in the way of these trees falling, that would be gone already before we got a stop work order. People risked their lives to do that. And other people risked their homes. There's people here, talk about politicians that should be protected. There's politicians that should also not be protected and should be prosecuted for things they do. We have 3 citizens here that may well lose their house. Because what? They made a complaint. They didn't file a lawsuit. They said, we're afraid of our water and we want you to do something about it.
People are on our side. The vast majority of the people, the vast majority in this room, and I think for every single person that was at this meeting today, there's probably 100 or 200 people behind that person within their close circle of associates. Your savings account has never been bigger. You have a $12 billion surplus last year. Year before that, $8 billion surplus last year. We're on track for a $10 billion surplus next year. So it's not a question that the money isn't there and we have to tighten our belts and there's some serious restraint. No, Canada is firing on all cylinders. The money is pouring in provincially as well. Last budget, in the middle of having these surpluses, the federal government cut $3.5 billion from the environmental budget. $3.5 billion. Nothing against paying down the debt. I think it's a great idea, but not at the expense of $3.5 billion worth of environmental programs.
Victoria just bought 10,000 hectares. They had to buy it. We can't buy Chapman Creek Watershed.
It's becoming almost a bit of a civil rights issue here. Why are some British Columbians rewarded by certain parts of the provincial economy by having their watershed purchased on their behalf versus other citizens? So you can almost take that to a civil rights issue.
Well, the water belongs to everybody.
Exactly.
The water belongs to everybody. They just happen to have the rights to log in certain areas, or companies have the right to mine in certain areas. But that doesn't mean that they should be trampling over everybody's others' rights to have clean drinking water. As your federal government parliament, it's my job to liaise between you and Ottawa to make sure that the issues that you think are important here on the ground, that I think are important on the ground, become issues that Stephen Harper starts talking about, and Jack Layton starts talking about, and Stefan Dion starts talking about.
There was a watershed reserve created in 1975 by the provincial government under the Land Act at that time called Section 12. Now the Land Act's been revised. It would now be covered off by Section 16. In 1975, when that was granted to the regional district, 6 years later, the same minister, because it was registered with the Ministry of Environment, Lands, Parks and Forest, that same minister, 6 years later, placed a forest license in 1981 on the Chapman Creek. That's the same logging license today that Western are using that expires in April. I can tell you that record, the reserve record, exists on the government's database.
That the ministries and the deputy ministers and the provincial government and the federal government, that with one stroke of a pen could stop this and get us the time that we need to do it through the courts.
So there needs to be a judicial challenge that watershed reserve, when it was done under an ordering council in Section 12, the powers granted under the Land Act that created that watershed reserve to protect the drinking water for the licensee holder, which is the district, the purveyor of water. What happened in terms of the forestry, under the Forestry Act that created that forestry license? And until some government takes that to court. Now, why couldn't the federal government ask that question?
Exactly.
I wrote a letter to the Premier 7 weeks ago, and I urged them to intervene on this because I said it will spill out. It will spill out into the province. And no reaction.
The more that we have town hall meetings like this, the more that we have demonstrations, the more that all politicians will have to listen.